Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13 going on 14 novels of suspense. My current book, Her Perfect Life, is casually displayed behind me on the door, but look at this, my new book coming up in February, The House Guest, which is sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. Is that not great? I'm so pleased with that. But I'm super pleased and even more pleased to welcome today the brilliant and talented and wonderful and dear friend, Rhys Bowen. She is, and we'll talk over the afternoon, but you all, she is wonderful. She is brilliant. She is charming. And this is her 16th Lady Georgie book, Peril in Paris. Don't worry if you haven't read any of the other in the series. You can start right in on this novel, Peril in Paris. Just like Rhys, this book is charming and clever and entertaining and wonderful. And I cannot wait. Pamela Frypriest is saying hi, Hank and Rhys, and Renee is here. And people are joining. Here's Anissa in South Carolina, and Lynn Hahnemann and Sharon Carlson Person. Everybody is here today. And of course, you are here to talk to the marvelous, hear from the marvelous, marvelous Rhys Bowen. And I will let you all know that Peril in Paris is an instant USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And that is, I mean, congratulations, Rhys, and welcome. How did that feel when you heard about that?
Well, it's always wonderful, especially USA Today. You know, all the books in the world are on it. It's not just novels. It's children's books. It's self-help. It's everything. So when you make that list, it feels really nice. But then the Wall Street Journal one, I was number 6 my first week. And I looked at the people around me, and it sort of goes Michael Connolly, James Patterson, and then Janet Ivanovich one below me, like, ooh, that's good. Especially when you think this is book 16, it's not like it's come out with a huge fanfare. It's like an established series. So, it feels really nice. I've done a lot of books, as you have, Hank, too. It never gets old when something is appreciated. When people say, I love this book, it means as much now as when my first book comes out.
And that has been a while, Rhys. Isn't this your 50th book?
My 50th book, yes, it is. I didn't realize that till I counted up, and I emailed my publisher. I said, this is a milestone. This is my 50th book. My first, Constable Evans, came out in 1997. So if you do some math, I've been doing 2 a year ever since. Is that crazy or what?
It's crazy. It's crazy from the standpoint of how hard you work. It's crazy from the standpoint of how talented you must be and determined and devoted you must be to work that hard. And it's crazy from the standpoint of how wildly successful you are. You're incredibly brave. You try new things. You are one of the most, you take risks. Susie Baldwin is saying, welcome, Susie, is saying, wow, 50.
Yeah.
And that when I asked about being a bestseller, your face just bloomed into happiness. Talk a little bit about that. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what's so satisfying about the whole thing is I started at rung number 1 on the ladder. I mean, some people come in and the publisher says, you're going to be the next big thing. And you come in with hype. I came in those days, they had a catalog with the upcoming titles in it. I was not only on the last page of the catalog, I was half of the last page. So that shows you how important they thought my new book was going to be. And they printed 2,500 copies. So, I mean, how is anybody going to get to know about a book where there's 2,500 copies, most of which will probably go to a library somewhere? So that's where I started. And so literally I realized if other people were not going to hype me, I needed to make myself work to do this. So I literally went to every book club that wanted me to speak, every bookstore. John retired in 1999. And we did 3 trips cross country, coast to coast, stopping at every bookstore along the way. Somewhere in the middle of Kansas, we'd stop at the bookstore. And that was wonderful. That really worked, because you gradually, if booksellers like you, they're gonna hype the book. And so, that was, and then I won some awards, and I think the awards really helped too. I know that Murphy's Law, the first in the Molly Murphy series, won the Agatha for Best Novel. So that really made a huge difference. But, so each, as you say, I've taken risks. I've learned that in this business, if you don't reinvent yourself, you often fall through the cracks.
Well, you were the queen of reinvention, but you talk about winning the awards, and you talk about this odyssey that you took, like Johnny Appleseed, seeding your books all through the United States. But what you have to have with that, you have to have a really good book. You have to have a book that wins people's imagination and wins you fans and leaves them wanting more. And now, book number 50, Peril in Paris, and already hitting the bestseller list. I see Margaret Lang is here, and Renee is here, and Mindy says, hi, Hank. Hi, Rhys. That's great. And Mary Garrett says, no idea how you keep up with so much writing, but I'm so grateful that you do. Loved this trip to Paris. We're going to talk about Peril in Paris in 1 minute. Let me just tell you really, really quickly, if you're new to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, quickly. A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the fabulous powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all learning about new authors, to keep us learning about new books, to keep our community together and allowing you a place to meet a new favorite author or to talk to one of your current favorites. And we know Rhys Bowen is one of those favorites. Absolutely. And if you are new to Rhys Bowen, Peril in Paris is the place to start. Quickly, let me tell you about Rhys. I'll read you her formal bio. Rhys Bowen, a New York Times bestselling author, has been nominated for every major award in mystery writing, including the Edgar, and has won many, including both the Agatha and Anthony Awards. She is also the author of the Molly Murphy mysteries, set in turn-of-the-century New York, and the Constable Evans mysteries, set in Wales, as well as 2 international best-selling. Is it 3 now? 3 international best-selling.
It's 6. That must be an old bio. 6.
I got okay. 6. How, because this is probably printed yesterday, as well as 6 international best-selling standalone novels. She was born in England and now divides her time between Northern California and Arizona. And we are giving away, Berkeley and Rhys are giving away so generously a copy of Peril in Paris to one lucky commenter. So just leave a comment for Rhys, or please leave a question, which we'll ask when at the end of the show, or just general applause and accolades, or how much you love Lady Georgie, or her standalones, which we will talk about as well, or Constable Evans, or Molly Murphy books, which she is now writing with her daughter. And we can see we have so much to talk about. Rhys, welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
Tell us a little bit about Peril in Paris and Lady Georgie.
Yeah, well, this was written during the pandemic, when we were all stuck at home, and there I am longing for Europe again. So my thoughts turned to, wouldn't it be lovely if I took Georgie to Paris? Then in my mind, in my, that little world you create for yourself, I can be in Paris all day. So that seemed like a good idea. So Georgie, as we found out, there are some spoilers here. So if you haven't read any of the series, you might put your fingers in your ears for a tiny minute. Georgie, at the end of the last book, is pregnant. Looking forward to a baby. And so Darcy, before the baby comes, Darcy says, well, wouldn't you like me to take you to Paris? Well, isn't that lovely? Georgie thinks this is so nice. She has a best friend, Belinda, who is in Paris, who is sort of apprenticed herself to Coco Chanel. Belinda's a really good dress designer. We know this already in the series. And so Georgie is going to stay with Belinda for a while because Darcy has a spot of business in Paris. Now, Darcy works for, we don't know who he works for. He's sort of this undercover spy sort of.
Rhys, are you hearing me a little bit? You're kind of intermittent. So we
Am I?
might, there,
I'm
you're back.
Oh yeah, shall I sit a bit closer? I'm not in my lovely media room in California where I have an external mic and everything. So I'm sitting.
I think it's the internet a little bit, not where you're sitting, but we'll just persevere a little bit and see how this goes. You were talking about,
the internet here is not so wonderful, so I'll enunciate very clearly. And
so you were talking about Darcy and in Paris.
Yes. So they arrive in Paris, and Georgie thinks it's going to be a lovely little romantic interlude in Paris with Darcy. But then he has things to do, so he suggests she stays with Belinda. And Belinda is in a crazy fashion show. So this Georgie with Belinda, she's not really comfortable in the fashion show world, especially now she has a large tummy bump. And she doesn't know what to wear, and everybody looks so chic. And then Darcy gets her and says, I need you to do something for me. And it's something that really sounds a little bit dangerous. So I can't tell you any more about that because I'd have to kill you. You know, that's what always happens.
Well, so, let's go back. Let's go back. And then I wanted you to talk about the story a little bit more. We'll talk about it as much as we can, which is a lot, actually. It's so much fun to read and so engaging. But if any of you, the viewers here today, have not read any of the Lady Georgies, and if you haven't, oh, you guys, you're just in for a treat. Tell us a little bit about who Lady Georgie is and how she came to be your main character.
Well, she came to be my main character by accident, Hank, because my publisher at the time, I was in the middle of writing the Molly Murphy series, and my publisher kept saying, we can't really break you out unless you write us a big, dark, standalone novel. So I kept thinking of all these big, dark things, you know, okay, there's a kidnapped child, and there's a terrorist going to poison the water supply. And I kept thinking, I don't really want to spend 6 months in darkness like that. So I dug my heels in and I thought, what would be the most unlikely sleuth that I could possibly come up with? How about if she's royal, but she's penniless? And it's the 1930s, you know, that wonderful time that's poised between two world wars, when you have these great contrasts of haves and have-nots, Great Depression, some people really rich. And then you have the contrasts of fascism, communism, and you know, it was a very strange time. They called it the long weekend, and that's what it was, poised between two wars. So I thought I'd love to set books there. And of course, you've got these characters I wanted to bring in, like the Prince of Wales and Mrs. Simpson and Noel Coward and all sorts of wonderful people waiting to come onto those pages. So I sat down and I started to create this character who's 35th in line to the throne, but absolutely penniless. Her branch of the family has no money. And so how does she survive in a world like that? She knows how to walk around with a book on her head and where to set a bishop at a dinner table. But these are not highly marketable skills. So what do you do? So I started her off with, in the beginning of the series, with literally nothing, when she flees down to their London house alone for the first time with no servants. And it's a huge, steep learning curve for the first few books. She tries all sorts of little things to see if she can make money. Most of them are quite disastrous. Like when she decides, she puts an ad in the newspaper to say that she would be a wonderful high-class girl who would be an escort to you, not realizing the double meaning of that word, you know. So she did all sorts of things like that. But her life over 15 books has now become a little more settled. She's married this wonderful, very attractive man called Darcy O'Mara. Yes, it was deliberate. When my editor asked me about the name, I said, I see Colin Firth coming out of the lake every time I write about him. And it was so funny. At the beginning book, when I first met my editor, she said, I have some things to ask you about the book. And I thought, oh God, she wants me to rewrite the first chapter, you know. And she leaned forward and she said, could Darcy take his shirt off a little more?
Could Darcy take his shirt off more? That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
So they finally got together and they're finally married. And so she's a little more stable in her life now. So we've explored lots of different, we've taken her to Kenya, we've taken her to the United States, we've done all sorts of fun things with her. And of course, in the future, we're looking forward to what would happen when they've got a baby. So it's, yeah.
But Rhys, I have to ask you, before we talk about the plot of Peril in Paris a little bit more, the voice of Lady Georgie is so true and so pure and so hilarious and witty. She's a little ditzy, but she's really smart. She's sort of inexperienced about things, but she's determined and plucky and eager to do the right thing. And, you know, she knows that she's in love and she has responsibilities. And we so enjoy being with her. Talk about writing in the voice of Lady Georgie, how she's blossomed under your auspices.
Well, that was really interesting, Hank, because when I decided that I wanted to try this book, I sat down and I wrote really stream of consciousness almost in the first person.
Oh.
And I wrote about 5 or 6 pages. And I just introduced myself and I said, my name is Victoria Georgiana Charlotte Eugenie. And then I went on like this. And those 5 pages have turned into the first chapter, absolutely unchanged. So I got her voice from square one. So I think I identify strongly with her. I know I've had people who write to me and say, "Oh, I just seen your picture. Until then, I thought you were Lady Georgie's age." And I'm a little bit older, not too much,
She'll get there. But I mean, that I understand what they were saying about the voice seems so seamlessly written, and you balance her sense of adventure. I mean, she's determined she's going to do it with her knowledge of the class system. She knows suddenly she's able to use some of what she knows about how the world works, whether you're the granddaughter of a king and queen or whether you're the scullery maid. She knows both sides of that. Talk a little bit about, I mean, in all of your books, in the Lady Georgie books, that class system is so tenderly developed and so well researched, and some of it comes from your own knowledge. Talk a little bit about how you do that so brilliantly.
Well, that's one of the fun things. I think that's what I wanted to do when I started the series, is gently poke fun at the whole British class thing, because for outsiders, you just can't imagine how it is in England, that really you're either in one class and you're in another class, and it's not the same in America at all. When we were doing another piece the other day, someone asked me, how would I come to America? And I said, in America, you can buy your way into the class system. You can never do that in England. And a good example, I was at a sherry party in the Cotswolds not many years ago, and the woman who was giving it said, "My dears, you will never guess who's just bought that house across the valley." And everybody leaned close and said, "Do tell." And she said, "My dears, he's a grocer." And everybody went, "Oh." And it wouldn't have mattered if he'd owned Safeway. The fact was, to them, he was a grocer and therefore not one of us. And so, it's interesting that that still exists today. And of course, in Georgie's time, they could tell your class instantly by the way you spoke. Remember with William and Kate, they nearly broke up because her mother used the word, she said she used the word toilet instead of lavatory. And toilet is a lower class word and lavatory is an upper class word. And so Kate was deemed way too common for William. Luckily, they stuck together, and but it was a big thing. It made headlines in England. They had newspapers saying toilet gate. So it still matters. So it's a lot of fun to poke fun at because, it's so real. And of course, I'm married into this sort of family. So I have sat in rooms where the older people would say, "Do you remember that joke we played on the butler that time? Oh, wasn't that amusing?" And so I get out my little notebook and write it all down. So a lot of the things you read in these books really did happen and people really did say them. And you think to yourself, how can somebody say something so silly? Because they sometimes do.
Oh, you were losing you. We're just at the punchline. You said, how can anyone say something so what?
Silly. So silly. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And doesn't that come from, you learn all those things, what words to use and not use, and how to stir your tea, those kinds of things, and whether you put the milk in first. You learn that from moment one.
You learn it also when you're sent to the proper school. I know my boyfriend for a long time in England had gone to Harrow, and he told me once, we did a genealogy chart of my house, and we found that we could link every boy in the house except 2. And the way he said it, you could just think of what those 2 felt. It's like, you're not one of us. You might be a scholarship boy here. This is So it is interesting that it's still happens. And of course, those schools, they teach you the proper way to behave, and they teach you, well, of course, they give you connections. So when you come out of school, your father says, go and see your set you up with a job. That's, of course, that changed because, people started coming out of university with real qualifications, and then it wasn't so easy just to go in and, old so-and-so will give you a job. So between the wars, the time I write about, that was how you did everything.
Well, and you use that to such great advantage in Peril in Paris, which takes place in Paris in 1936. Again, this time where we as readers know what's about to happen, but the characters in your book don't know. Talk a little bit about that foreshadowing and that knowledge that you have that Georgie and her crew don't know, and how that fits into this book.
Well, that's so true, because we can't write with any foreshadowing, because my characters don't know there's going to be another war. In fact, when I started this series, they thought Hitler was very amusing. The people in England would say, that funny little man with his moustache, isn't he so comical? And they couldn't believe he would last. Now we're in 1936, and some people have a good idea what's going on. And of course, Georgie's mother, who we've met throughout the series, Georgie's mother is classic Boulder. She's moved from man to man. I think in one of the books I said,
Rhys, I'm losing you. You're talking about, for all of you who can't hear Rhys, Rhys is talking about Georgie's mother, who was an actress who has moved from man to man, and now she has wound up in Paris with yet another man, Max, I think his name is, and I think we have you back, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't know, because it shows I'm getting a good signal, so I can't understand why it's moving. I'm sorry about this. But anyway, I once said that she has been many things to many men on 6 out of 7 continents. Yes, so she's with a very rich industrialist, and we're in Paris, where she's buying some clothes at Chanel. And she's been trying on clothes, and she meets Georgie there. Darling, what are you doing here? And then when she's ready to go, queue next to her is open. The German woman comes up and says, I'm ready to go now, Duchess. And you suddenly realize Georgie's mother has a minder. And you realize this is how things are in Germany now. And George is getting a hint now that her mother may not be safe.
I mean, it's so, the fear is so interesting, as you were saying, that when Georgie realizes that her mother has a minder, a German minder, who is watching over her every move, and she knows that her mother is moving in circles, that her mother has her own ambitions, which have to do with money and power, and doesn't see what's going on around her, that other people have ambitions that have to do with a lot of power, and that she may be caught in the middle of it. So you were talking about the fabulous Darcy, who husband, who asks Georgie to do her a favor, and meanwhile, Georgie's been asked to model at Chanel's new collection. And we meet Coco Chanel, and we come into the atelier, and we hear about the clothes, and we meet Mrs. Simpson. Talk a little bit about how much fun it was to write in that milieu.
Well, of course, it's fun to start with, to take you into the salon at Chanel. I mean, how many of us have been there in real life? Mrs. Simpson, I brought in at the beginning of the series because I thought she'd be fun to write about. I wanted to make her as horrible as I thought she was. What it turned out as we went along is that Georgie's mother, who grew up in a fairly humble situation, is a great sparring partner for Mrs. Simpson. So those two women don't give each other an inch, so I'm putting them together and see what's going to happen again. But someone said to me the other day in one of these, you made Mrs. Simpson nice in this book. And I went, well, she has to have some redeeming qualities, and she did. She came through very well in the end in this book. So it was fun to write about, but I do love writing about her, and she would have been at these things. I know she dressed mainly by Schiaparelli, but she could have seen what was going on. And of course, this is the year. This is 1936. The Prince of Wales has now become king. He's King Edward VIII, and she seriously believes that she's going to be queen. she just does not get it. She doesn't get that the Church of England does not allow divorce. And she's a twice divorced woman, and there's no way she could marry the head of the Church of England. It's just not going to happen. But she really believes, I think, and it's funny because she's so smart and worldly wise and able to twist men around her little finger. But at the same time, how naive. She really believed that when he became king, he could say that I will marry her. And
because she was an American. And so she wasn't brought up in the proper British schools, and she wasn't brought up in the British class system. And she really thought that because she wanted something and it made sense to her, he would be the king and she's his wife, she would be the queen. That's what made sense to her. Did you do a lot of, I mean, you seem to know her so well. Did you do a lot of research about her, and why was that so much fun?
I did it at the very beginning series much more. I read every biography that featured them at all. So pretty much I knew what she'd really said. I think with any of my royal characters, if I had them say something, I knew it was an opinion they really expressed. Oh, so I didn't manipulate them. I sort of put them as real people in on the page. And I knew the sort of things she said. And she was so rude to the rest of the royal family. You know, she used to make jokes about the Duke of York's stutter, the one who became king after he abdicated. She'd make jokes about the fashion sense of his wife, became Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. She used to call her Cookie because she's one's cook. And
we lost you on what she used to call her. Can you say that again?
Yeah.
I don't know why the internet is not only going in and out, but seems to be doing it so particularly on the punchlines and the punchline of what you're saying. It's stealing your punchlines like crazy. You were saying that Wallace Simpson used to call.
She used to call the queen after. She used to call her Cookie because she.
Are you all hearing this at all? We cannot Cookie, right, Rhys, says Margaret Lang. Is that correct? You used to call her Cookie? We're not hearing you. Rhys, you are completely frozen.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, it's very strange. I can see are you all seeing the, is this can't be just my computer, right? Are you all having a little interference? Yeah, Darlene is saying yes, it is going out a little bit. And people are putting up, everybody is really lauding you, Rhys, loving this book. It's a plot by Simpson fans, says Mary Garrett. The internet going in and out. All right, so it's slow and frozen.
Am I back now? Am I back?
You're kind of back. You're kind of back. Let's persevere a little bit because we're talking today about Peril in Paris, and I don't want you all to miss this book. I have gushed endlessly about this book to you, and you don't really need Rhys to tell you how great it is and that you should run right out, not right now, but after this is over, and get your own copy of this. And just to reiterate, you don't have to have read the other books to start right in on book 16, Peril in Paris. And then I promise you'll go right back to Her Royal Spyness, the very first book in the Georgie series, and you will love, love, love it. Let's try you again, Rhys. And we're saying signed copies at the Poison Pen, which you definitely want to visit the Poison Pen, the bookstore of all bookstores. Let's talk a little bit about exactly as you're saying, and I think that's one of your secret sauces, Rhys, is that you don't have people say things that they wouldn't have said, and it comes from your brilliant research. And also the language that is used. There's not an anachronism in the language. There's not a thing that's out of place or out of time. We meet Gertrude Stein. We meet Hemingway. We meet so many interesting people in this book. Talk a little bit about how you got the voice of the time. I mean, the cars and the buses and the servants and the butlers and the taxi drivers. How did you do that?
Well, I think a lot of it, when I was a child, these people were, they were younger adults. So a lot of the things, a lot of the terminology, a lot of the way people spoke was still a carryover from the 30s. They still had their favorite slang words, and they still, people would say, "Oh, I say, old bean," and "Oh, you are a brick," and all these things which, were part of the 30s, but people still carried on with them. And I don't think because England went through a war after that, I think everything was frozen until my childhood, say in the 50s, when, things like buses and taxis and things really hadn't changed at all. So, and London's been London, as you know. Nothing happened very much in London until the early building in, say, late 60s. So I'm writing about places that I really, and of course, I go and stay at these big houses, and they're just the same as they always were. And the villages in England, the same as they all. Not much has changed, So, and I do my research. I read up on, what Hemingway might have said when he was. I made him rather full of himself, didn't I?
Yes.
I got that feeling he really was, like, hello, darlings, I'm here,
Wouldn't that have been fun to see him?
Yeah.
And we do feel that we are at one of Gertrude Stein's parties in Peril in Paris, and it is so much fun. And I want that gold dress that Chanel showed.
You would look fabulous in it. It would have been made for you, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. I said, my golly, like Georgie says. Was that a real dress, or did you design that in your head?
It was the highlight of her collection that year. Yes, I saw it. It has a hood, and it's a one piece, and it literally it fits the form so well that it looks like you've been dipped in gold. So.
And see, you all, this is one of the many things that you'll love about Peril in Paris. It's just so much fun to be taken back in time by Rhys Bowen. You will enjoy this book passionately. You will be completely hooked. I'm sorry about the transmission a little bit. I don't want to let you go, Rhys, without telling us about your standalones. You talk about, and I want to tell you all that Rhys made this happen. I know, Darlene, a dress with a hood. It is fabulous. Rhys made this happen. Her publishers didn't want her to do it, and she did it anyway, and to great and wild success. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I had series that were doing well, and but I had ideas that were just outside those series, and I had a great desire to write about World War II. And so I came up with this idea for a thriller, a spy thriller that's set in World War II. And my publishers didn't want to tackle it. They said, no, this isn't one. Well, this one said, no, it isn't funny. Well, it's World War II. It's not supposed to be funny. So my agent said she knew who was dying to publish me. And that was Danielle Marshall at Lake Union, which is one of the Amazon publishing companies. So it was a big risk because, I've still got my other publishers, which is a great, lovely, but bookstores, of course, hate Amazon with good reason. And, so I knew I was taking a risk to do this, that I wouldn't be in a lot of bookstores, etc. But I did it, and they promoted me like crazy. And I mean, it's a different universe. These books sell several 100,000 copies in English, and then they're in like 30 other languages. So,
I mean, I remember a long time ago, you telling me, I want to write a big World War II book. I'm passionate about this. I really want to do it. Yeah. And this is what we were talking about earlier, that you take risks, that you want to get better and bigger as a writer. And the Tuscan Child was nominated for an Edgar, right? For Best Novel. So, and Renee is saying, Rhys, you're absolutely amazing. And Janine is saying, Rhys power, you go, woman. And that is, I mean, you're such an inspiration, which brings me to, first of all, what's your new standalone? Do you have it right there? Show it to us.
Oh, yeah. This one came out in August, and it's called Where the This time, it's very different. It's about the home front. It's about what would happen if you were an ordinary woman in World War II and your house was bombed around you and you were dug out of the rubble with nothing. I literally reborn. Where would you go? How would you make your life? And that's really how the book starts. She's shipped out to the country with nothing. And it's still, but she creates the universe around her.
And Where the Sky Begins, since it's about pilots as well in the RAF. Yeah. So Where the Sky Begins, Where the Sky Ends, it's all about taking off and blossoming and changing, and how much the world was terrifying at that time and how important home was. and
Yeah.
tea and being cozy and feeling safe, and how people never thought they would feel that way again. I'm talking a lot, Rhys, because you're sort of going in and out. So I'm sort of trying to wait till your signal comes back. I don't want to leave. And Deborah is brilliantly saying, can we put that up again? Don't let others tell you what to do when you feel something strongly. Move the mountain so you can succeed. And that is what you have done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Deborah. I don't want to let you go without talking about your new writing partner.
My new lovely writing partner. I'd been writing the Molly Murphy series, which is very different. If you don't know my books, the Royal Spinous ones, you're going to chuckle. The Molly Murphy are a lot grittier. They're about an Irish immigrant in New York in the early 1900s. And I'd written 17 books in that series. And I really couldn't do a big standalone, loads of research, 400 pages, and the Royal Spinous book and the Molly Murphy. So Claire, my daughter, came to me and said, I'd really like to write the Molly Murphy series with you. And of course, my first thought was, God, can I squeeze in another book in a year? No, no, no. But anyway, we gave it a try, and she was wonderful. I thought I'd be holding her by the hand quite a lot to start with. She came up with plot ideas. She got Molly's voice perfectly to begin with. And she was just a delight. And so we've now finished our third book together. And she's, she loves the research. She finds really fun things to do with the research. And this third book we've just written is set in the Catskills at the very beginning of the Jewish bungalow communities there. So such interesting things to write about.
Well, it is such a joy to see you and Claire on this new adventure. Can I ask you what it's like as a mother, as a mom, to see your daughter bloom and blossom and flourish, doing what, sort of picking up the mantle or wearing it as well?
Oh, I mean, what could be more fabulous? Because, I always knew she was a good writer. This is my Renaissance woman daughter. She's the one who got degrees in biology, Spanish and English literature, and then went and got a master's in music. And she's the daughter who will say, I was driving home, I was listening to NPR radio, and they had this very interesting book on string theory. So I ordered it on Kindle, and now I've read it. And I go, don't tell me. So the fact that she can write really well, I knew that. But the fact that she just got it so quickly. And I can start to step back more with every book. And then I can say, okay, this is your series. Go,
It kind of brings tears to your eyes, doesn't it?
Yeah, fabulous. I mean, you always want to help your children. But I mean, I did say to her, you do realize that normal people don't come in at this level.
Well, she's your daughter, though, so there are no rules. There are no holds barred in Rhys rules. Thank you, Rhys, for being so generous and so wonderful about this fabulous book, Peril in Paris. I know we have questions. Do you have a couple minutes to stay and answer some of the questions? And Deborah is saying how awesome she learned from the best. Let's take a couple of questions from people in the audience, and I know that we have some. I know that one of the questions is, did you take lots of notes in September around the time the Queen died? I bet the emotions were similar for some of Georgie's situation, says Margaret. That you were in London at the time, right?
I was, yeah. The interesting thing was I had arrived in London 1 hour before the Queen died. We just checked into our hotel, and John said, let's go down and get some lunch. And we traveled with my other daughter, Jane, and her husband. And we were heading to, and I picked it up and I said, oh, the Queen's died. And at that moment, my daughter came out of her room and she goes, Mom, the Queen's died. So they went straight down to Buckingham Palace, and they joined the crowds there with all the flowers piling up, and everybody. Jane said the amazing thing was people stood in silence, just standing there in silence while people came and laid their flowers there and everything. Just amazing. And the next day I had a luncheon with some people who were trying to do the TV version of the Constable Evans. And so I was walking down Piccadilly, and every church bell was tolling, just every minute, bong, bong, just, gave you chills to listen. And all the shops had their windows draped in black. And some of the shops had signs outside saying, we will be closed during the period of mourning. And, they all had these wonderful tributes in their window. And it was like everybody in London's grief. And the funny thing for me was that I got millions of messages from people saying, I am so sorry for your loss, as if it was my loss. I suppose because I write a series that involves the royal family, but I think it was everybody's loss. And people kept saying, I am so sorry. And I said, I'm not sorry at all, because she died on her terms. She was up at Balmoral that she loved. She was working the day before. She met the new prime minister the day before she died. She had Anne and Charles with her. And I think she was extremely lonely since Philip died. So I think it was her term. She went out on her terms, and hooray for her.
That's a lovely way of thinking about it. And you know this better than any of us. I know you had tea with her once, right?
I did, yes. When I was about 18, 19, I was at college, and I was the vice president of the college. And the Queen Mother was our patron and did quite a lot with us. And the Queen Mother was supposed to be coming to open a new building and was sick. And so the Queen came instead. And so 6 of us were invited to tea with her. And literally in a normal room on our own with a round tea table, and 6 of us and the Queen and a maid to pour the tea, and that was all. So we were told ahead of time, you do not eat anything Her Majesty doesn't eat. And Her Majesty, as you know, has always watched her weight. And so Her Majesty had 1 piece of brown bread. And so the rest of us had to sat there with our 1 piece of brown bread like this.
And were there other things that you wanted?
There was a gorgeous tea table with, little tiny eclairs and strawberry tarts and everything you can think of. And of course, being hungry college students, we all looked at them. But she was lovely. She was so easy. She was, by that time, Charles was just a little bit younger than us, because one of my friends there was a mathematics major, and she asked all of us what we were studying. And Linda said, I'm studying mathematics, ma'am. And she said, oh, my son is hopeless at math.
That's great. That is a wonderful anecdote. Only you, Rhys, could tell us about tea with the Queen. This is why we adore you and love you and revere you. And your book, Peril in Paris, you all, is just like Rhys. It is charming and entertaining and knowledgeable and funny and endlessly wonderful. So, Rhys, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Let me stay right there while I just tell everyone, next week, I'm looking for the books that we're having next week. Next week, we're double booked, and we love that here at Crime Time. At 3 o'clock, The Guest House by Robin Morgan Bentley, which is chilling and frightening and the thriller to end all thrillers. A husband and wife decide to take one last vacation before they have their baby in a place that looks like that. Not a good idea. All of you readers know that. And then for something completely different, at 4 o'clock, we have the fabulous Mia Manansala with Blackmail and Babinka. And never 2 books have been more different than these 2. And that's what Crime Time is for. And we are here for you today, Rhys Bowen. Welcome, welcome, welcome on your instant bestseller, Peril in Paris. It's been wonderful to have you here. Oh, the drawing. Yes, I'm being reminded about the drawing. Thank you, Margaret, in the back room. We are drawing for a copy of Peril in Paris. And the winner is Nancy Hay. Oh, Janine. All right, Janine Woodworth. Well, that's fantastic, Janine. Congratulations. And you will see some instructions on your screen about how to claim your copy of Peril in Paris, Peril in Paris. And after this, you're going to go right out. If you did not win, you're going to go right out and get your very own copy, possibly at the Poison Pen, which will allow you to buy a signed copy, and they're going fast, of Peril in Paris. Now, Rhys, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, well, thank you, Hank. I love talking to you anytime, but I really miss you in person when we can sit together with a glass of wine and and gripe together.
Right, and solve all the problems,
Solve the
solve
problems
all
of
the
the world.
problems
Yeah,
of the world. Absolutely so.
yeah,
Absolutely so. And we love to sit and talk with all of you
yeah.
every Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET here on Crime Time. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan. And until next time, stay safe and keep reading. Love you so much.
Thank you. Bye.